We got a question? Oh, never mind. Thank you. I thought we hadn't even started and got a question. All right, thank y'all for being here. We'll try to make this little thing short and sweet. Good-looking crowd. Looks like a lot of y'all I've maybe not seen here before, so that could be a good or bad sign. Hopefully good for us and good for you. Got a few more members. There's a lot of meetings going on. I've had about 6 or 7 members saying they're presenting bills in other committees. They'll try to get here when they can, but we're going to go ahead and get started and try to move this along. Let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll move into it. Lord, we do thank you for this day. Thank you for your blessings. Thank you for the breath of life that you give us each day. Lord, just bless us that we'll have wisdom as we go about the duties of representing the state of Georgia. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for these that are gathered here. Bless us this day in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. If you would turn your cell phones off. I got a good chairman that always says, hey, make sure you get your cell phones off. So I have done mine, so that would be nice. I don't know if we got any real housekeeping measures. I'm going to go ahead and announce this. We've got our committee dinner coming up on the 12th. If you haven't seen Julie and signed up for that, committee members, I think she's got some information out on the table here. We need to get a head count. So if you would do that, and we got to talk to our other friends that are not in here and try to get that lined up. And we thank the people that's working to sponsor the committee dinner. We appreciate your support. Appreciate y'all's contribution to that. Got 2 pieces of legislation we're looking at today, and we're going to go ahead and call Representative Williams, House Bill 736. If you'll come down and talk to us about your proposition, my friend. And you want to go to the podium?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay if I come here, then if y'all will come to the table, go ahead to the table so you can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill 736. We call it the FUTA bill, the food answer to the Uber movement. So we're going to let Mr. Robert Seals explain the bill and answer any questions that you may have. Mr. Seals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. House Bill 736 is intended to rectify or improve efficiencies in food permitting as it relates to pop-up restaurants. And for a little bit of background on where we're coming from, our client FUTA operates largely as what you might call a broker. What they do is they partner with local, frequently independently owned small business restaurants to put those restaurants into office buildings or complexes during the weekday for the lunch hour where they may not have other frequent fresh food options. The restaurants like it because typically the weekday lunch hour is some of their slowest sales times. The office managers enjoy it because it gives their employees a chance to eat a healthy, wholesome lunch. And ultimately, I think everyone likes it because they get to do more business and hopefully create more jobs. The issue that our client ran into with the Department of Public Health, and I'd like to go ahead and preface this by saying that we appreciate the department's willingness to engage in conversations on this for the last several months. They've been very helpful, but we sort of just reached a difference of opinion as to what might be an efficient means of resolution. And so the department indicated to us that FUTA and FUTA's participating restaurants, rather, would need to apply for mobile food service permits. These permits are more frequently associated with food trucks. In actuality, under FUTA's model, restaurants are preparing they're preparing their food at their already existing permitted location, much as a caterer would. They're boxing it up in accordance with those rules. They are transporting it to the site just as a caterer would. And the principal difference that we have here between a food truck and a caterer is that catering right now under DPH's rules and regulations does not allow for point of sale. So what FUTA's restaurants do is they cook the food, they prepare the food, they transport the food, and then they lay out those options for individuals working in that office building to choose what they would like, at which point they pay the restaurant employees at that time. But there is no cooking of the food going on. They could keep the food warm, they can keep the food cool, but essentially they're handing out the meals that these individuals are requesting and they're paying for there. That's the source of our conflict, and that's the source of what I believe to be sort of our regulatory inefficiency. So what this bill effectively does is that it would enable FUTA to obtain, or any other broker, in this bill we call it a facilitator, to obtain a permit for a designated location, let's say the King and Queen buildings in Sandy Springs, to allow for already permitted food establishments to prepare their food at their site, transport it to the King and Queen building, and then sell it to the private employees of that building. All we're asking for in this bill is to essentially allow for point-of-sale catering in a very closed, limited environment. We remain open to discussion with the department, and we appreciate the ongoing dialogue we've had with them and the Georgia Restaurant Association, among others, and we continue to be flexible. But the stark contrast between sort of the original intent of the mobile food establishment permit, which is meant for trucks that can go anywhere, that cook on site, and the difficulties associated with obtaining those permits, the additional cost associated with obtaining those permits is very problematic when all we're trying to do is help local restaurants sell more food. And we have not been made aware of any environmental health concerns that would arise out of that, with the exception of that these events would need to be kept private. Our client and other individual entities that are pursuing this sort of model agree, and we remain open to any environmental concerns that there are. However, when we're essentially just talking about catering and the only thing that's different is swiping a credit card, we believe that this bill would help create much greater efficiency and streamline the regulations to both preserve environmental health concerns and enable restaurants, local small businesses to do more business. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
All right, and did you state your name and who you're with?
Robert Sills, I'm an attorney at Denton's Law Firm, and we represent FUTA.
Last name?
Sills, like window sills.
And let me just say before we get questions from the committee, anybody else need to speak on any of these legislation coming up today? We have a sign-up sheet. If you need to sign up, we'll get it back down for you. A couple of questions. Number 15, I think you were first, sir. Oh, ma'am, I'm sorry, ma'am. Hey, good to see you, Ms. Karen.
The originating restaurant,
Hmm.
is that the restaurant that is transporting their own goods to another location, or is the pop-up an individual entity that goes from one restaurant and then goes to their destination?
That's an excellent question, Representative. No, the individual restaurant, so let's say it was Fox Brothers. If Fox Brothers was going to come to, hypothetically, the CLOB, FUTA would make that connection, would facilitate that arrangement, but Fox Brothers would prepare all their food on site, would transport it with their own employees, and would sell it with their own employees on site. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Go
May
ahead.
I,
Yes,
another
ma'am.
question, so what does FUTA do?
FUTA is essentially their business model is predicated on networking, I think would be the easiest way to describe it. And so what they're trying to do is take, and aggregate a great number of restaurants so that those different restaurants are in these buildings throughout the week. And as they grow that network, as they grow into more office buildings, as they grow more restaurants, ideally the rising tide lifts all boats. And so the restaurant industry in Metro Atlanta and hopefully later on in Georgia would benefit from this.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I'd like to be very clear that restaurants themselves, under the language of this bill, would be able to be facilitators as well. I know that restaurants are already operating pop-ups, and they are doing so with mobile food permits. We believe that that is, as I've mentioned, a less efficient regulatory structure, but this bill would not impact their ability to continue participating as they already are with mobile food permits.
Are you good, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, Representative Deffenbaugh.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Seals, and I'm not sure how this varies from catering to what you're proposing, the pop-ups. The locations, who inspects for cleanliness, safety?
Right, that's a great question. And so what we would be happy to do and what FUTA has done in other jurisdictions, and they currently operate in, I believe it's 26 different metro areas around the country. We are all for any inspections deemed necessary by the Department of Public Health at those locations, and happy to do our part to facilitate those. I mean, typically, I think the vision is to ensure that there is a hand washing station permanently installed at every location, but we remain open and willing to discuss that further.
Do catering have that restriction now? I mean, as far as inspections or?
My understanding, and I know that there are representatives from the Department of Public Health here that I'm sure can speak to this quite effectively, but my understanding is that typically when catering to a private establishment, those rules may vary depending on the type of catering, the type of food that you're doing. And that's why in the bill we've included that language stating that catering rules need to be adhered to in the preparation, transportation, and serving of food.
Is one of the speakers from the health? Okay, then
Yes, sir,
I'll-
we have somebody from
Thank
the,
you.
That'll
the
be
Public
fine.
Health
Thank
Department
you.
here.
Yes, sir.
Robert, one more question that I see right now. I've got a couple more popped up. Representative Kirby,
Thank
question,
you,
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Make sure I understand this. There's about, put this in an example, there's about 20 of us on this committee. If I collected $10 from all of them and called the varsity, had them cater 20 box lunches out here, that would be fine. But if I'd said, hey, they're coming and they're just gonna sit up and you go down there and pay them yourself, that wouldn't be fine.
Currently without a mobile food permit, I do believe that that would be the case, yes, sir.
So this would take care of that situation.
That is our intent.
All right, number 14, Chairman Powell. I don't know. Let me keep trying. I gotta try it again.
Let me ask you a question. What is it that public health that they're doing is prompting this bill? Is it because it's a new business model, they don't know anything about it and they're holding it up, or they're overcharging? What are they doing?
Sir, I think that the Department of Public Health has done a really excellent job in working with us on this. The fact is, we have a difference, I think, of opinion. Department of Public Health does, and not incorrectly, believe that this model could be achieved through the existing mobile food service permitting process. Under that process, each restaurant that wanted to work with FUTA, for example, or any other facilitator, would be able to obtain a mobile food service permit and then go out and do business that way. We, however, believe that that is a less efficient and less ideal means, regulatory structure by which that should occur. If we are essentially catering but for point of sale, it seems extraneous and unduly burdensome for these restaurants to have to go out and get another permit, pay for that inspection, to essentially conduct business that they already oftentimes are doing as caterers. That one change, they're not wrong in that this could work under the current structure. However, we believe that it amounts to red tape that we would like to see cleaned up.
Shocking, huh? You are a good lawyer. Further question. On line 27 there, as I'm reading this is also setting a limit of 3 hours a day at the locations that they can do business?
Yes, sir, and that is in response to or in following the typical way in which a catering operation may occur. A caterer doesn't prepare food typically and then serve it all day. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that we are limiting this to the scope of the activity that we want to permit, and that of course would be serving lunch at these individual locations. We are open, and I know that the Restaurant Association has indicated that they would like to discuss sort of those limits and those time limits further, and we're very open to doing that. But we want to be clear that we are not trying to expand the scope of catering beyond really this point of sale issue that we have.
Your first statements when you started talking, you were talking about that possibly in businesses and places like this, like office buildings, this would give them another option and such. But I also notice on line 28, but you're limiting this to 2 days a week, a maximum of 2 calendar days a week.
So that would be for an individual restaurant availing itself of this. So we would not, Fox Brothers essentially would not create a mini Fox Brothers in the CLOB for 5 days. Again, that's designed to make sure that we are limiting this basically to that catering scope once again. And so it would be Fox Brothers could only come 2 days a week. That doesn't mean that we couldn't have a different restaurant in each day, which would in fact be the ultimate goal or the ideal goal.
So So if I had a choice, I work in the office building,
Mhm.
and this service came in. You got Fox Brothers, but they can only serve up to 2 days a week. So then the varsity comes in for the next 2 days, so you're gonna make me miserable for the next 2 days.
Well, sir, I can't speak to your taste in food, but it does sound like you prefer Fox Brothers over the varsity, and I think I'm with you on that one.
Is that all, Chairman Fowler, for this?
It is.
Okay. Well, I have to disagree with you. I love varsity, but it's all right. You know. Look, okay, let me make sure the scope of what we're trying to do here is basically you're saying that the catering license is not going to apply because we've got a facilitator that's doing this. They don't selling food. They're not doing anything other than bringing the restaurateur, the person that's making the food, making them available to come into an office building, and that's all the facilitator's doing. But you're saying the licensing now under the catering permit will not meet the criteria of what you want the facilitator to do. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And to sort of reiterate, the facilitator permit is intended to be an umbrella permit which allows for point-of-sale catering. That's
For
why.
multiple restaurants?
Yes,
They
sir.
want one, you want one permit to cover multiple restaurants. If you got Fox Brothers, Varsity, or, you know, Jason's Deli, or whoever bringing in food, you want one permit for a year or whatever, for those guys to go out and facilitate, or to facilitate bringing in these restaurants into a high-rise or something.
At that location, yes, sir.
At
Yes,
so
sir.
you got one permit per location.
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're looking for? Not one permit for facilitator, but per location? Is that what you're talking
Well, the
about?
facilitator would, and under the language here, the facilitator would hold the permit for that location, which we would anticipate would enable for adequate inspections on the part of the Department of Public Health. The overarching umbrella permit that the facilitator holds would essentially allow already licensed food and permitted food service establishments to cater and then, of course, sell point of sale there. So the umbrella is allowing for the point of sale.
But the restaurant has got to have a catering permit.
Yes, sir, we'd be fine with that, yes, sir. Yeah.
All right. So we are setting up a license basically for a facilitator, if I understand this correctly.
Yes, sir, to allow for that point of sale transaction in
And
private.
what can
business.
they get now? What license can they get now? You said they can't get a catering license because they're not preparing the food. They're not a mobile food service, but you're saying that you think the public health says they could qualify under mobile food service. Is that correct?
The individual restaurants, yes, sir, could apply for mobile food service permits. That's right.
Any other questions for, Mr. Robert here? You got one more? All right.
Just to clarify what was just discussed, if I am a facilitator, how many different locations can I have? Because I can bring in multiple restaurants, is that correct?
Yes, sir, there wouldn't be a limit, but the permit would tie itself to the location. If you look in subsection B, the facilitator applies for the permit at that location.
So there's only one location per facilitator.
Well, a facilitator could apply for an additional permit at an additional location.
But he would have to permit for each location, not just,
As it's written now, yes, sir.
okay, thank you.
All right, Robert. Let's see if we can make this a little clearer, maybe. I think we got Katie and Chris. Katie Kopp and Chris Risen. Would y'all come up? Robert, you step aside a minute,
Yes,
let
sir.
them sit down if you would. We will probably bring you back up in a minute. Let's try to get this maybe a little clearer here.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Kopp. I'm with the Department of Public Health. I'd like to thank the chairman and the members of the committee for taking the time to listen to us today. And I would also like to echo the thanks to FUTA and to Denton's and to the industry for working with us on this. It is our position, as Robert outlined, that FUTA can operate currently under our existing rules and regulations with no additional permit. It's our position that this bill would add unnecessary regulations to the industry that we don't think they would ultimately be very happy with. So I can turn it over to Dr. Chris Reston. He's our Director of Environmental Health, and would be glad to further outline our position and answer some of the technical questions that you all had.
So, good afternoon, Chairman Maxwell, committee members. I really appreciate you letting me try to bring some light to this. And again, I want to thank Denton's as well. We have worked very closely with them, and they've been very nice to work with in regards to this. But I think our position, as Katie mentioned, is pretty firm in the fact that the reason our biggest concerns with this bill is that we work very closely with the restaurant community through the Georgia Restaurant Association to try to balance our rules and regulations with the needs of the industry, and we feel like we've done a good job at that. Under the current bill, we believe again that the mobile food vendor permit is the best option. No additional regulations are needed. The facilitator permit is really unnecessary now. Anyone could be a facilitator. There is no requirement for a permit for that. I could be a facilitator, you could be a facilitator. Our regulations are designed to ensure food safety at the restaurant, not the facilitator level. Our current system is set up based on risk. We have food service permits that are designed based on the risk of the facility. Anytime a restaurant moves food off-site, they increase the risk. And when you're operating within four walls of a restaurant, the risks are easier to control. But when you move off-site, things that we're concerned about are temperature abuse, being able to transport food safely, being able to ensure they have the right equipment in place to be able to do that their staff is properly trained on how to do that. Under our current rules, our mobile vending permit ensures that the restaurant has that correct equipment, has the space to be able to prepare this food in bulk, has the ability to transport this food off-site. And we verify this long before any event because we want to make sure before there's an event, before there's any type of pop-up location, that they have the necessary equipment and training in place before that event's in place. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this particular type of permit, this mobile vending permit, is valid for 1 year. It's mentioned in the bill that the facilitator permit's good for 12 months. The vendor permit that we currently have is good for 12 months. It opens up additional opportunities for the restaurants. In addition to going into office buildings, restaurants that get these mobile vending permits can go anywhere off-site. But the key is that we're able to work with them through their permitting scheme to make sure that they have the necessary equipment in place and the training needed to reduce the risk. The one thing that I really want to point out is that the way this particular facilitator permit is set up, one permit covering multiple restaurants is going to have a significant impact. For example, if there's 10 restaurants in a building and we have one permit, if one of those restaurants violates food safety codes and we have to take the permit, I mean, the permit is essentially giving them permission to operate under a restricted activity. If we take that one permit, we shut down the whole operation, all 10 restaurants. The reason our regulations are set up to go for individual restaurants is it gives us the ability to regulate that individual restaurant. Just like if you get caught speeding, they take your driver's license, not the person that's riding with you. It's the same concept. If one restaurant makes a bad mistake or is putting the public or anyone at risk, we can actually regulate that individual particular restaurant. And our rules are already set up to do it that way. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we believe this bill, if passed into law, would add significant additional work requirements to the local environmental health staff that work at the health departments. The reason for that is we're never going to know until we get an application what restaurants want to change their method of operation. Now a lot of restaurants are strictly stick-built mortar buildings. Now they decide they want to move off-site. If we get multiple numbers of these applications, it's going to add additional work because we're going to have to go out to every single site to verify they do have the equipment in place. We verify that up front through a mobile vending permit, which gives them the ability to operate off-site without additional inspections. It's not to say we're not going to show up and do an unannounced inspection, but we don't have to show up every time because they've already proven that they meet the intent of the mobile vending regulations. Now, we talked about catering, and I know there's a little bit of confusion around catering, and I do believe that there's probably a point of difference between the Department of Public Health and FUTA. The bill briefly mentions catering, and I want to explain how catering operates. We don't require an extra permit for catering. That's incorrect. Restaurants can cater now, but what they have to do is apply to the health department and demonstrate that they have the necessary equipment to do off-site catering, that they actually have the space to be able to containerize food in the bulk that catering typically allows. But I think more importantly, under our catering rules, is a caterer signs a contract with an individual. And they designate in that contract how much food is going to show up, exactly what's on the menu. And the reason for that is because we need to be able to do trace back in the event that there's an outbreak or someone gets sick or injured from that food. We need to be able to trace it back to those individuals. And I think one of our concerns with kind of opening up this to the point of sale at different buildings, a lot of buildings the public has access to. The building I work in, the public has access to. What's to say the public doesn't just show up? And these, once we, with a typical caterer, we've already confirmed that they understand the rules and meet the equipment requirements. In this scenario, we're not going to know unless we show up on site to do these inspections. So it's going to add a lot of additional inspections. And just to give you one example of where this has gone wrong, we had a restaurant, a pizza restaurant, not too long ago, that decided they wanted to be a caterer. They didn't notify anybody. They just started preparing turkeys. And they caused one of the biggest foodborne outbreaks we've seen in Georgia recently during Thanksgiving. It's because they didn't have the right equipment in place. They didn't have the ability to do it safely. And we feel like this may add an element of risk to off-site vending. And so that's probably our biggest concern. In summary, we feel like our rules currently address this issue through mobile vending. There was a mention of fees. There is fees at the local level. The department at the state doesn't charge fees. At the local health department level, there is inspection fees charged to offset the cost of those inspection services. But this is an annual fee. It's charged one time for that annual permit. And so we do feel strongly that our current system setup will address all of the issues that is unnecessarily added in this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Doctor. I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Oh, we've got Karen Brunner and another gentleman here is going to speak in just a moment. The Restaurant Association. Okay. So for what I'm hearing, if I understand this, the mobile food service permit now would allow these restaurants to bring food into a high-rise with a permit. They just call you guys, so we're going to start taking food in. And it's different from catering because they're not being hired for a particular event. Is that right? They're not hiring, but they are contracting with that high-rise or somebody in that high-rise. So I'm having a hard time differentiating, I guess, between catering and bringing in food. What's the difference there? Can you help me out?
So in this particular scenario, if a restaurant gets a mobile vending permit, they can contract with people to sell. They can actually go off-site and actually in anywhere basically in the community. They don't necessarily, they aren't limited to the things that are currently in this particular bill. With catering, again, the issue is point of sale. We want to be able to control and know what is being served and to control the risks. We don't require a catering permit.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Catering, it's already been bought and paid for by whoever's bringing the food in. The individual's bringing in the food at that point in time. Here, you're bringing in the food, and everybody's going down and buying it individually. Yeah. All right, my little simple brain couldn't grasp that for a few minutes. Okay, I got that. And this permit, but they're not a mobile, they're not a truck vendor, they're not going out here with these trucks that park out on the street, but you're saying under that mobile service, they could get a permit there and be eligible to do what they need to do without additional legislation.
Yes, sir.
All right, well, I've generated a whole lot of questions, looks like. All right, number 28, I think you were first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for being late to your meeting. I had some quality individuals,
Girl Scouting.
Girl Scout troops down from Alpharetta, sir. And
It's all right.
while they may not be able to vote for us now, they are very important to our community otherwise.
Down the road, I understand.
Seriously, I will inquire and provide that at our next stop if I can get a permit to do so. Do I have to get a permit for each type of cookie, Mr. Chairman?
No, sir. Not yet.
Serious question for the gentleman, and again, apologize to the chairman and the members for being late. Going back to one of your comments, and I am familiar with this. I think at the risk of getting somebody in trouble if they're not supposed to be doing this now, I think this is in fact occurring in the building, which I am an office, which I office in. The one thing you mentioned that you were concerned with was if something goes wrong with the food at a restaurant. We won't pick a restaurant. That if multiple restaurants are doing that, it would shut down the whole process. In my particular instance, on a given day, we get like an email beforehand or an email on Friday before Monday that says, you know, restaurant A is going to be there on Monday. They just let you know what's going to be there for lunch, and then on Monday, Tuesday. Typically, in this case, there's only one restaurant coming. I don't know that would necessarily be limited in the bill here. It wouldn't be done, but is it not true if this were to go like this and you were to come over and do some sort of on-site inspection that day and you found something wrong, it's the restaurant's choice to enter into this agreement, full well knowing that if there's 2 or 3 there instead of 1, if restaurant A is in violation, you shut B and C down as well. Is that not just a private matter for them to decide? I mean,
Well, currently, because we don't have a permit like this, we don't regulate that way. But you are correct. You are correct.
I thought I understood what you would have to do is
We would.
if we saw this thing serving, we can't bifurcate A, B, and C. So if we see something being served in error, then we'd shut down B and C. I mean, that would be something that the facilitator, using the proper term, would just have to communicate and have in their contract, and there may or may not be damages. I mean, that's private contracts for people. Okay, so I'm trying to understand what we're trying with this piece of legislation. We're trying to make it simpler for restaurants to involve themselves in this type of arrangement where they contract through a facilitator to get into a building rather than each of them. And your concern is when they contract and the facilitator is licensed, the restaurant may or may not be up to standards, you know, have the proper equipment. So you don't see anything in this code that says the restaurant is able to serve in a particular place.
We wouldn't know. Because we wouldn't know if the restaurant is capable of serving off-site. Under the current system with a mobile vending permit, when they apply for that, they have to demonstrate that they can do that safely.
Fair enough. And if you don't mind, I'm just trying to, and this may have been covered. So I have 3 different restaurants and 3 different buildings, you know, permutations and combinations. If without this law today, it sounds like all 3 of those restaurants would have to get permitted to serve on site. So there'd be 9 permits that would be required if any one of those 3 restaurants. Under this scenario, there would be 1. Your concern is making sure the restaurants A, B, and C are able to serve outside. And that makes sense to me, Mr. Chairman, to provide healthy food. I think what this is trying to do, there may be a combination, there may be a merger here, because you're concerned that they can do that. And I think the restaurants, and I wasn't here to hear the gentleman before, but I think they may be concerned that if I can serve it off-site, it doesn't matter if I'm serving it at 2 South Main Street or 2 North Main Street or Canton Street or Roswell Street. So would it allay your concern if the facilitator had to secure, in other words, if a restaurant they entered into a contract with had to be certified to serve food off-site somewhere, but not at each individual physical location? Would that help allay some of your concerns?
So, under your scenario,
Yes, sir.
the facilitator is now responsible for all food safety because they're getting this permit. We would still have concerns with that, primarily because we believe that the restaurant that's serving the food is the one that's highly trained in ensuring that food safety is met. Currently, under our rules, a facilitator permit's not necessary. It's not needed. A restaurant can do this now without having to obtain that or have to go through a facilitator, so to speak.
But and I'm sorry, but just in the interest of time, you were very kind to answer my question. But to do that, if a restaurant wanted to do this in 9 different places in Atlanta, they would have 9 different permits.
Oh, no.
Okay,
no.
that's what
I'm
I was.
sorry, I did not. I misunderstood
That's what I
you.
was. That's why I'm trying to connect the dots here.
I misunderstood you. It's one mobile vending permit gives them access to go anywhere off-site.
Okay.
Apologize for misunderstanding.
Okay, well, that hurt me, Chuck. I kept running a rabbit with you there for a minute. I thought, where were you going? Yeah, here you go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right. Number 24. Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You both all sides started talking about how well you've been working together and talking about this. So tell me from your perspective, what's FUTA seeing that they don't like? Is it the cost of this mobile permit? Is there a cumbersome, overburdensome regulation they feel? I mean, what are they saying that why this isn't working for them?
And I believe Mr. Steele alluded to that when he testified. I think it is local cost for those mobile vending permits. You know, for their model to work, they've got to make sure restaurants understand that you have to get this additional permit, which is going to cost a fee at the local health department. And so I think that they have concerns with that. And then probably the biggest point of concern is how our current catering setup is in place. So we don't allow point of sales because we feel like we can control the risks without that under catering. And so I think it's a combination of both between the two.
Well, this bill doesn't say anything specifically about fees, but we all know this permit's gonna have a fee. You know, and who's to say if it's a cost but of a fee that this is gonna be more or less? Unless I guess we do.
Yeah, the department doesn't set local environmental health fees. Those are set by the local health department boards of health.
Thank you.
Chairman Harrell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The mobile vending permit that's available to restaurants today, as I understand FUTA's business model, they don't prepare food. They don't serve food. Can they get a mobile vending permit? Can FUTA get a mobile vending permit?
Sure, anyone can get one.
Anyone
They would
can.
have to apply and demonstrate they have a safe location to prepare food. They'd have to have basically
But
a
if FUTA,
kitchen.
if their business, they do not prepare food, nor does their business model anticipate preparing food.
No, they can't get a
They
mobile food.
cannot get.
No, because they're not preparing the
Right,
food.
and I think
the
that's a
restaurant.
clarification that the committee needs to understand. A restaurant can do this on their own by getting a mobile vending permit. However, FUTA, who will not be preparing food, cannot get a mobile vending permit. The business model does not include their preparation of food. So that's a distinct difference that we either need to decide if this business model works in Georgia or not. But if it does work in Georgia, there is, it seems to me, going to have to be some modification of the statute to permit that business model to exist in Georgia. I don't see any other way around it. And perhaps I've missed something. You mentioned, and I think alluding to Chairman Martin's point, I agree that if there was an outbreak of some sort or a violation of some sort at a building, and you had to revoke a permit, and let's say I'm restaurant A, that has a mobile vending permit, and the outbreak is at this particular building. When you pull the permit, are you pulling my ability to serve in all locations? So are you also shutting down my brick and mortar restaurant at that same time?
Not necessarily. We're shutting down your mobile food vending permit, essentially.
So clearly you're gonna stop service at the office building where you've identified the problem.
Yes.
But if I'm 3 blocks away at another office building, are you gonna immediately shut that service down at the same point?
It's not necessarily, because there may be same operation, different locations. The individuals hired to work this location are violating the rules.
Right.
The individual hired to work this location are not necessarily.
Right. And so throughout this scenario and the proposal of FUTA, each of these restaurants that you've suggested, and I agree, could choose to do this on their own. As a restaurateur, I could get this mobile permit, I could go negotiate with the building owner, I could set up a couple times a week here, a couple times a week there. But as a small restaurateur, if I had a company coming in and saying, I've negotiated all these different locations and set up, the service, now I can get my product to the market, I can advertise my main brick and mortar store, I've got more opportunity for people to come see me, but I also have to understand, to Chairman Martin's point, the risk. And it's to your point, it's a contract. I'm entering into an agreement, and if there is, if we go down the route where there is a blanket permit, then as a restaurateur agreeing to a contract with a private vendor that has a blanket permit, I've got to accept that risk that if something goes wrong, and I'm aware he's going to have 2 or 3 other restaurants in the same lobby of the same building, and that I'm at risk that if something happens and I get shut down. But it seems to me, I think this was part of Chairman Martin's point. That's, as a private business person, I have to evaluate that. And I think the main thing we want to ensure is, public safety.
Absolutely.
And that's your primary focus too. So, how do we ensure that the food is properly prepared and properly maintained, and that the customer can have confidence in purchasing this product? But at the same time, again, if we're going to allow a new business model in Georgia, then it seems to me that we're going to have to make some modification to the current statute to allow that to happen. Yes, sir.
Can I respond to that? Under the current structure, our regulations don't touch FUTA. They are currently allowed to operate in the manner that they would like to operate. We in no way, shape, or form want to regulate a third-party entity or a broker, so they can currently do that now. The only difference is a restaurant would need to get a mobile vending license to be able to work with FUTA, because again, we focus our energy on the restaurant. So currently, FUTA can operate. They can operate right now. We've never said they could not operate. Our concern is that we want to make sure the restaurants get the appropriate permit so we can ensure food safety on that end.
Thank you.
That's where I was going back again, that if FUTA has to buy a permit, there's going to be some cost involved. To Representative Kirby's question, somebody's going to have to pay for that permit. And it's going to cover, I would assume, all the restaurants that they're going to want to contract with. Yeah, but at that point in time, you guys may not know who they are, so you're not going to be able to go back and check and verify that they are, legitimate. Somebody just hadn't started up. Brett and I hadn't gone out here and started making ham sandwiches and run them into a high-rise or something. But if we've got the mobile food service permit now, one restaurant can do that anywhere they want to, pretty much in the state, I guess. That's not right. Okay, I'll let you address that in a minute.
Within the county.
And the county, within the county. Okay, within the county, because it's got to be, they got to get that from the county health department. Okay, so it's within the county. But that one restaurant can get one here and serve, multiple locations in the county. If they have a bad incident, y'all shut them down at that location and say, hey, we got a problem here. You're not going back to the brick and mortar. You're not going out to other places where they're serving. Okay, that's what I want to make sure of. All right, number 15, we got another question, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. I didn't look down far enough. I keep thinking you're sitting down there beside Alan. You're too close to Chairman Powell. Yes, Ms. Bennett.
I would have loved to have, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I would have loved to have been able to get my thoughts around this, as seems like my other colleagues do. I just need a clarification. The point of sale, with FUTA as the facilitator, the restaurants having their mobile license, when it gets to the building or the business, who does the transaction? Is the transaction between the customer and FUTA, or is the transaction between the customer and one of however many restaurants can come into that building that day?
I can't speak for FUTA on this. From our perspective, the transaction occurs between the restaurant and the customer, but I'm not sure if that's the correct model for FUTA. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, no more questions, I see, Doctor and Madam. Let's bring up Karen Brimmer and hear from her. Thank y'all.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and representatives. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak today. I would like to disclose FUTA is actually an allied partner of our organization. They are a dues-paying partner with our organization. We support the ability of our restaurants to be able to sell food where they are permitted by law. Currently, restaurants can get a mobile food permit and set up wherever they would like to do, in whatever location they would like to do. They're not precluded to a certain amount of days or a certain amount of hours. They have to have a bon fide food service permit in the brick and mortar restaurant. And there are reasons, and I understand the reasons why we want to have each individual location to have a permit. We also support the business model of FUTA going out and being the person that creates that relationship between the restaurant and the building. That is a great business model, because many restaurants don't necessarily know how to sell themselves or to market themselves, but would like to be in additional facilities. So we support FUTA in what they're trying to do. We just want to make sure that everybody is following the law as it is, rules and regulations of the Georgia Food Code as they stand.
Does this bill comply with what you're thinking that law to be, or do you think what we've got currently would be sufficient? Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I think what we have is sufficient right now, and as somebody said earlier, FUTA can be operating and doing this at this current time. And there's been some discussion of additional costs. In Fulton County, which has the highest county licensing fees, in order for a restaurant to get a mobile food permit is $366 a year on top of whatever their current license is. So that's $1 a day to go anywhere they would like. And again, we think FUTA has done great work in many cities in the 26 metropolitan areas that they're working in. I don't know how the model was set up in any of those cities, if they had to create legislation. And we are hoping that once this is resolved, that we can help make our members aware of a service like this, so that they can expand their reach of their restaurants to other parts of the community.
Okay, so bottom line, if they pay $1 a day for the mobile food service permit, they're able to go into any location in that county with FUTA facilitating their arrangement with a high-rise or whatever. And, I mean, that's pretty much it. FUTA doesn't have to buy anything. The restaurant pays $360, and they're good for a year. The health department checks them out, makes sure they're able to do what they want to do, and that's pretty much it, for what you understand.
Correct.
Okay. All right, well, I've generated more questions. Sorry. Number 24.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Actually, the chairman generated this question. That mobile food service permit, is it county by county or is it statewide?
County by county.
So that $365, 66, whatever, every county they go to, they'd have to have a different one.
Yeah, it varies from county to county, but I believe I did a cursory check that Fulton County had the highest one.
Okay, so that's just Fulton County, so.
Correct.
All right.
All right, Chairman Martin, that you again, my friend?
Yes, it is, sir. I'll be more succinct. Would it be, you have either been or, in the business, would it be, and if I'm asking you a question, you don't choose to answer, or choose to give us your opinion, I appreciate that. If this were to pass, the way I read it is the restaurant would no longer be required to get a mobile food service permit. Because it says on line 25 and somewhere in part, and no further permit to provide such services shall be required from the restaurant. That's the way I'm reading it now. But would it be wise, if I were a proprietor of a restaurant, for me to enter into a contract, whether required or not, without a mobile food service permit? How would my insurer feel about that?
That's actually what was going to be part of my response is I'm not sure about the liability involved in that. And as a restaurateur, of course, I would have the choice to enter into a contract with a facilitator, but that shouldn't preclude me from going to other locations with my mobile food permit.
Well, and then nothing in this legislation would do that. I guess I just look at it, Mr. Chairman, if this were to pass, I see it might provide a facilitator easier access. But if I were a restaurant doing business in one, I believe I would go to my county and get a mobile food service permit just so I could tell my insurers and, I'm.
Bottom line, you'd be legal in your county. All right, one more question here. Number 18, Representative Effenbaugh.
Yes. I guess what I'm trying to wrap around my brain about, which is pretty small sometimes, is what is the advantage to the restaurateur to enter into this agreement?
To enter into a contractual agreement with FUTA, you would have
FUTA.
somebody that would be marketing, that would go out and do the heavy lifting with the building to get the building to agree to allow restaurants to come in on a regular basis. FUTA would, I believe, under this, would also be the ones that tell the county where they're going to be. Is that correct?
But
Okay, yes.
could FUTA not do that without this bill?
No, FUTA could do,
Everything that they want to do without this bill?
correct. I believe they have to have a business license in the state of Georgia, I'm assuming.
I'm so-
All right, thank you, ma'am. We
Thank
got
you.
one more presenter on this, Michael McPherson. Michael, clear this up for us, my friend.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the moment to speak to you today, and I thank Representative Williams for being so kind and working with us, and the folks from Denton's, Robert and Elmer, for helping us out with some concerns that we had in the earlier draft.
And you represent,
I represent the Georgia Municipal Association.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
Jim.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Michael McPherson.
right,
We think we share the concerns with the two previous presenters in that, there's questions that are left hanging out there, and we feel that you can probably come to a conclusion on this and have some legislation that is good for both FUTA and the industry if we have time to work on it. But we're very supportive of the pop-up idea. It's very popular across the country right now, and we want to be supportive of our restaurants, those businesses that work so hard in our community to bring us great food. So we thank all the partners involved, but we share the concerns and hope to work with you through the process.
okay, that was good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, Robert, you want to finish up for us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. Thank you again for having us. I just want to be very clear because we've heard, a lot of speculation as to what FUTA's goal is, or can FUTA operate without these permits. The answer is we can. The challenge, however, is it the most efficient means of operation for small businesses in the state of Georgia? Because we're talking about cost, and we might be talking about $1 a day. But if you're having to get a mobile food service permit to essentially cater in every single county in the state of Georgia, that's not simply $366 here or $200 here. That's time and energy and inspections. And this bill simply provides, it explicitly states that all catering rules and regulations have to be followed. So if a restaurant wants to participate, they need to have their local county health department come out and make sure that they are capable to cater. And the beauty of rulemaking, because this bill does not spell out every single item that we would need to address here, but the beauty of rulemaking is that the department has the ability to issue public comment and to have a discussion about what needs to go into place. So if we are effectively asking for a mechanism by which restaurants can be allowed to cater and do point of sale, then we can institute in the department, we can work with the department to create rules to ensure that it is limited to private access, as catering would be, so you can do any sort of trace back that you need to. We can enter into a rule to ensure, or we can have the rule include a requirement that there be a hand washing station at every business where this would need to happen. All of these, we can have sneeze guards, all of these things can be worked out, but the challenge is if we think about staying with the mobile food permit, then that becomes a burden for every small restaurant in the state of Georgia and every county that they want to operate in when they are not running food trucks. They are not cooking hot dogs and hamburgers in the back of a Ford E350. they're preparing their food just as they always would at their existing restaurant. They're boxing it up, they're taking it to a place, and then they're serving it to a set number of people. I mean, if we have an office building with 100 people in it, we would ask the office manager to take a poll. Hey, who might be interested? They say 70 people. We'll make 75 meals, and we'll throw away the rest in accordance with DPH procedures. It's about ease. It's not about impossibility, but it is about ease and efficiency. And so we would respectfully ask that the committee keep that in mind, because this bill will give us the opportunity to continue to work with the department to flesh out that rule, to make sure that all environmental health standards are met. But when we're talking about a singular difference between catering and mobile food permitting, and that's point of sale, we've got a lot more in common with one than the other. And the requirement of that permit in every single county does become burdensome.
Now, I've got a little problem with that, to be honest with you. I
Yes,
don't
sir.
see somebody that's located in DeKalb County gonna run over to Augusta or come out to Paulding County to, you know, provide sandwiches for somebody in a building. I mean, they're gonna be pretty much, I would think, more of a local nature. I mean, they're gonna stay pretty much within a county or maybe one county over. They're not gonna have to go to 159 counties and municipalities and get permits, I wouldn't think. They're just not gonna do it. I mean, that's not gonna, where they wanna market their brand. They wanna market their brand where people can drive into the restaurant without going all over the state. I find a little disconnect there in my brain with the 159 counties. It appears to me that this bill would generate a lot more regulation in the long run and a lot more cost than what it's going to cost them now to pay $360 as a maximum to get the food service permit. That's just my thinking on this. Good God Almighty! Every time I talk, I generate buttons here. Brett, what you got?
Let me, like, the catering caused a little concern with me too. Better describe the FUTA model to me. When I hear pop-up restaurant, what I've understood to date was that there could be multiple restaurants, not just a single restaurant, under a FUTA model, providing meals in an office building a number of days a week. So that as a resident or occupant of that office building, I might have a choice of more than one lunchtime meal. That's not accurate?
No, sir. It would be one restaurant per location per day.
And so the suggestion that catering maintains private access, the FUTA model also would not make anything available to you. Are you ordering in advance?
FUTA would work with the restaurants and the office buildings to determine approximately how much food would be expected to be consumed. The restaurant would then put together a limited menu, say 4 items, say 20 things, 20 brisket sandwiches, 20 fried chickens, what have you, and then folks would be able to choose, you know, at the time of lunch what they wanted to eat. I mean, that's sort of the difference between the catering, where you would prepare X and you wouldn't have a choice as the individual purchaser, the employee at the office building.
Okay, thank you.
All right, one more. Brother John.
Thank you, sir. Are you ready for this? You know, you have made several comments that there has to be a lot more things worked out to make it work. Is that erroneous, or is that
No,
fair?
sir. No, sir. But that is how any bill that would come through this committee that would affect a department would then go through rulemaking to formalize the desires of the legislature should the bill ultimately pass both chambers.
Although we're not going to be making those rules, we're going to vote on what this is.
That's right. Yes, sir. And so what this would
And
be.
are we ready for that?
I believe so. I believe if the question is, should a business model in Georgia be permitted by which licensed restaurants that already engage in catering follow catering rules and simply engage in point of sale, I believe we are ready for that. And the department alluded to it, and we're certainly aware of how the rulemaking process would dictate that. My comments earlier were just intended to demonstrate that this is not about environmental health issues. This is about, can this business model be permitted? So yes, there is more work to be done by the department and by any interested partners. But the question is, are we willing to allow for point of sale effectively in this limited circumstance? And that's why this bill spells out what that circumstance is.
Or are we willing to wait to resolve some of those issues before we pass a law.
I think we're fixing to take care of that in just a moment.
Thank you.
Mr. Representative, you got any other comments to make at this time? Rick? No, okay. All right, number 24.
Mr. Chairman, this has been an interesting conversation, and I'm just not ready to make a decision right now, so I'd like to move that we table this bill for today.
All right, got a move? Got a second to table the legislation, get some more information on it. Today, right. Just table. All right, got a move and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed, like sign? You just want it passed, Billy. You lost. We'll catch you on the flip side. All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank y'all.
Chairman. Appreciate it.
We'll try to work with you some on this. Thank you, Representative. All right, let's see if we can't get something a little more fun here. Taxi cabs. House bill. Thank y'all for the discussion on this. Representative Powell, House Bill 757. That was interesting discussion, but I didn't. Mr. Chairman, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I bring to you today House Bill 757. This is a little bit of cleanup language. Back about 4 years ago, I think in this very committee, I brought House Bill 225, which was a cleanup and basically deregulation of the taxi cab industry. We've had a couple of, at that point, we had just a couple of the municipalities that allowed medallions. At that point, we froze the medallions that they couldn't expand anywhere else in the state of Georgia. We couldn't do away with them because you can't do away by law with somebody's personal property, and that's what these medallions was, even though they were being bartered around like so many poker chips at that time. And we did a good bit of cleanup language on the taxi cab limo business, which was in conjunction to this new day of the ride transportation services. But that's what we did in 225. And we bring to you today House Bill 757. If you look on in Section 1 on lines 31 to 36, this is just some language that reinforces the existing local law governing medallions, that such law remains in effect as long as the local governments are consistent with the state law. This is because some of the attorneys and the legal staffs have been possibly misreading the intent on the medallions, but that's what this does. It just reinforces. On Section 1, page 4, lines 47 to 50, it applies additional wording that applies to the state law to the local ordinance that requires a medallion for the pickup, not drop-off. For those of y'all who were here 4 years ago, you might remember one of the craziest issues that we've seen, and that's how do you regulate taxi cabs, limos that are doing that type of business that they couldn't come into town. Well, at one point, you had Atlanta PD officers that was chasing down taxis that were coming in from out of town, like from Gwinnett County or DeKalb County or somewhere like that. And it was said that if they had to have a medallion to actually do business, and that's picking up customers in Atlanta. So what we're saying in this is it just reinforces that language, that you got to have a medallion if you're a taxi. You got to have a medallion to pick up fares. Now, an out-of-town taxi can drop off somebody in the city. They just can't pick them up, and it reinforces that language. Section 2 on lines 94 to 97, we're giving a definition of the soft taximeter. You know, of all the things that there's been so much so many changes in public transit since with the advent of the taxi referral services or the ride transportation services. They don't have a meter, one of the old hard type meters in the vehicle. They use a phone. Everybody here that's got a smartphone, you can get an app that can tell you how many feet you're walking for your exercise. It can give you the best route for delivery. It can tell you exactly how many miles, tenths of miles, or fractions of a mile it takes to get from point A to point B. Well, what we're saying in this, we're giving a definition to that soft taximeter. In the next section on lines 104 to 105, we're saying that that these soft taximeters will now be permissible for use in the taxi cabs. So not just the hard type meters, but also a soft meter to basically put them in stead with the competition. If you look on lines 146 to 150, what we're looking, let's see, I've left out a part here. I'm sorry. I want to go back to section 1 on lines 56 to 60. That adds a provision, a security provision, that says that if you're running a taxi or limo, that you need a ID card that'll be clearly visible to the patrons of that service. Put it up on the mirror or wherever they want to put it. And this can be any type of ID as long as it's IDing who that driver is and the name of that company and that they're in that business. They can go as far as easy enough. They can go to DDS and get an ID card that the state issues if that's what they wish. If you drop back down to lines 146 to 150, this is probably the only thing that just defies common sense to me, but you know, I'll be quite frank with you, in the metro Atlanta area, and I mean no harm to my friend Megan and those folks, I don't know what the hell these people think about down here, but the taxi business that's regulated by the folks out there going to the airport, they even came up with a regulation that says you can't run a vehicle out there, you can't run a taxi that's over 7 years of age. You know, I don't understand that because a lot of vehicles out there are in perfectly good mechanical shape. They're in good shape for doing business. And what we're asking, let's bump it to 8 years. I'd personally like to bump it to 10 years, but you know, I'm going along with what the folks that's striving, trying to stay alive in this business. They said go to 8 years, so that's what, personally, I think they ought to be a 10 or 12 year on these vehicles, but they've asked for 6, and that's what I've proposed out there to them. This is you know, the day of the transit industry has changed so much with the invent of ride transportation companies, and quite frankly, these folks are just striving to stay alive. Be glad to answer any questions, and I appreciate your vote, and this bill ain't gonna stay up here as long as that public health bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We got number 23. Representative Braddock, you got a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
So you said the age of the vehicle is 8 years. What is it currently?
City of Atlanta said that you can't run a taxi cab to the Atlanta airport if that vehicle's over 7 years of age.
7 years. Okay. And you're just moving it to 8. That's it. Thank you.
What do they do? Go out there and check you every time you pull in and check the VIN to see what the age of the vehicle is, or how do they do that?
At some point, I need to explain the craziness of this whole system.
Okay.
You know, but that's not for this bill.
Okay, that's all right.
When we talk
They wouldn't let
about
me take my
when we-
truck down there, I guess.
When we talk about security and the stuff, it's all about the money, you know.
Yeah.
The city gets paid $3 and something by the ride transportation companies that don't have background checks, but
Yeah, we fought
dollar
that
and a half
battle.
others.
Yeah, okay. Chairman Harrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to clarify, and I believe I understand, but on lines 47 to 50, which preserves the medallion system in those communities that have adopted it.
Yes.
In other portions of the bill, we have a number of definitions, but, and this is, of course, just part of the code section, but taxi cab, I just want to confirm taxi cab, as used in this section, does not preclude our friends in the rideshare community, correct? So that is a totally separate definition for ride. So the definition of taxi cab, by preserving the medallion, that is not gonna prevent that ride share from making a pickup within the community.
Nothing in this bill has any effect on ride sharing.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Representative Veskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the definitions in section 2 and trying to understand this change put in here to allow for the taxi cabs to use a soft, is it called a taximeter or a taximeter? Whatever we're gonna call it, the taximeter. So I'm trying to understand whether the counties or cities here have an opinion about this. If you, based on my personal experience, when you're in a cab, not in a rideshare vehicle, but when you're in a cab, part of the value of that meter up there is for the customer to feel like they're being charged the proper fare. So I think the things that govern that are the metering device, which is under paragraph 2, the taxi meter, which used to be 6 and is now 7, and now the soft taxi meter under 5. So are the counties or cities concerned if the taxi cabs are gonna no longer have that meter where the customer can feel confident they're being charged the right thing? Does the city county have the ability to make sure that the fare being charged is a proper fare? I don't think that was a very articulately asked question, but I'm trying to figure out what we're missing.
And your point.
I'm trying to figure out what we're missing if we're going from the clicking meter to now he's got the tablet there. He thinking the driver is that's a presumption. The driver no longer has the clicking meter but has the tablet.
Right.
How does the driver demonstrate to the the rider what they owe and that it's the proper amount?
I'm sure that they show that would be shown to the customer.
And the city county has an audit trail on that. The city county has a way to make sure that the fare is going through the soft.
I think we've got one back here. It's gonna be displayed just like the meter. Is that what I'm understanding?
Okay, great.
It'll be displayed. It just won't be a meter. It'll be
Okay, great.
be on the screen.
So it'll be a screen visible in the back seat. And will that have the ability to swipe to pay or, okay. So it's simply turning up, it sounds like it's turning an analog meter into a digital meter. Okay, thank you.
Actually, what they're trying to do, they're trying to move ahead, change how they're doing business so that they can stay in competition.
Okay, adaptation is a great thing. You know what happens if you don't adapt?
Anything else, Representative? Is it? Very good. Representative Martin.
Yeah, so Chairman Powell, basically, that's just a new and better meter. I mean, it's just a redefinition of the device, and perhaps would email the same, I'm not saying it has to by law, but perhaps would email you the same type receipt you get from a ride share now.
Exactly.
Something like that, okay.
All right. Anything else? Got a motion to pass. Got a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, let them say an aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. No cheeseburger, no tacos. We're ready to go.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, don't forget to see Julie and let us know about the dinner. And thank you very much. We will meet again soon. Thank you.